Good afternoon, good evening, EA 120 class. This is Scott Sexton, your hillbilly professor. I want to jump right into it. We've got some things I want to cover that have to do with how to look up things in the NEC code book, and it's just from the hillbilly professor's point of view. I've got some reference material I'm going to read to you. So if I'm looking off to this way, it's because I'm actually reading it out of the book because I wanted to get it right. Uh, let's talk about the terms and concepts. And I'm gonna read this to you, and then we'll kind of go back over it a little bit. The NEC contains many technical terms. It's crucial for the code users to understand their meanings and applications. If you don't understand the term used in a rule, it will be impossible to properly apply the NEC requirement. The Article 100 defines those that are used generally in two or more articles throughout the code. For example, the term dwelling unit is found in many articles. If you don't know the NEC definition for a dwelling unit, you can't properly identify the code requirements. Another example is the term outlet. For many people, what do you think of an outlet? That's a receptacle. On the NEC, Article 100 contains the different definitions of terms used throughout the code. When definition is unique to a specific article, the article is indicated at the end of a definition in a parentheses. For example, the definition of pool is specific to Article 680 and ends with parentheses 6, 8, and 0 because it only applies to that article. Definitions of standard terms such as voltage, voltage drop, amp, impedance, resistance are not contained in Article 100. If the NEC does not define a term, then a dictionary or a building code acceptable to the authority having jurisdiction shall be consulted. So this is not all the end all the way go to, but it's just the reference lines for where how they things want things done. Okay, let's talk about small words and punctuation. Technical words are not the only ones that require close attention. Even simple words can make a difference to the application of the rule. Is there a comma? Does it use quotation marks or and, or other than, greater than, or smaller than? The word or can imply alternate choices for wiring methods. A word like or gives us the choices, while the word and can mean an additional requirement that must be met. Okay? Understanding or and other than, greater than, or smaller than, making sure you understand those terms will be critical for you to be able to understand how to interpret the code. For an example, an important role of small words play in the NEC is found in Article 110.26c2. So let's go to that. Let's go to 110. It's pulling it up now. It says 110.26c2. Give you guys to open that up time to get to your book. Take me that time to be able to scroll down here. (110.26). Well, I go find it. Now I'm looking for C. Well, there's A working spaces. That's an A1, so it's going to have to do with A. Two, three, four. There's B. So clear spaces. Okay, still looking for C. Here's C, and it says C2. Well, now we went to C2, large equipment. Okay. Where it says equipment containing overcurrent switching, or let's see. Talking about right here. Now it says the equipment contains overcurrent devices, switching devices, or control devices. There are 1,200 amps or more and over 600 feet wide require a means of egress at each end of the working space. In this section, the word or clarifies that equipment containing any of these three types of devices listed must follow this rule. The word and clarifies that in 11026C2 only applies if this equipment is both 1200 amps or more and 6 feet wide. Okay. So that's actually how you kind of interpret these smaller words and what they're actually going to mean. If it's going to mean it's going to require all of it or just a partial part of the code itself. So grammar and punctuation play a role in establishing the meaning of a rule. The location of a comma can dramatically change the requirement of a rule, such as 250.28a. Everybody go and look at that. 250.28a. Let's go back. .250, so that's going to be chapter 2, article 250. So this is how you actually can use this. You can use your chapter or your table of contents and go to where you need to go. That's how I do it. Whenever they give me a reference on a code number, I go directly to it this way. If I'm looking something up, I utilize keywords, and we'll get into that further as we go through to be able to look at what we're trying to find specific things in a question. This one asks to go to 250.28a, so we're at 250. Let's see if we can find Article 10, 250, 21, 24. Anybody find it before I did? 26. You guys should have books out. You have them out quick. 250.28. Where it says a main bonding jumper shall be a wire, bus, screw, or similar suitable conductor. If the comma between bus and screw was removed, only a bus screw could be used. That comma makes a big change in the rule. Okay, so what does that say? That's 250.28a. Right there is where they're talking about, right there in that spot right there. So that by changing a comma and taking that out, it changes the whole meaning of what you have to do or what you're allowed to do in this particular instance. Let's talk about slang terms. Okay, what we're looking at is slang terms or technical jargon. Trade-related professionals in different areas of the country often use slang terms that aren't shared by everybody. What I would call something back down south, I don't know if you've understood this, but I am from Oklahoma originally. What we call something in Oklahoma, someone in Texas calls something differently. Someone in Michigan is going to call it something completely differently, and it could very well be the same thing. So when you're using references in the trade, it's better to use the proper terminology. That's one thing in these in the trade I think is important. Everybody's talking about the same thing, because if I ask you to go get a part for me and I call it one thing, you're going to go and find something totally different and think you're square and helping, and it's just wasting time. And then you're not understanding what it is that I'm talking about, or I'm not understanding what you're talking about. So if we have a common language and everybody understands, which would be the proper terminology, we'll be able to work well. Trade-related professionals in different areas of the country often use slang terms that aren't shared by all. This can make it difficult to communicate if it isn't clear what the meaning of those slang terms are. Use the proper terms by finding out what their definitions and applications are before using them. For example, the term pigtail is often used to describe a short piece of conductor that's used to connect a device to a splice, but a pigtail is also used for a rubberized light socket with pre-terminated conductors. Although the term is the same, the meaning is totally different. The words splice and tap are examples of terms that are often interchanged in the field, but are two different entire things. Uniformity and consistency of the terminology used in the code makes it so everyone means or says and means the thing regardless of the geographic location. Okay. So let's talk about how the NEC is styled and laid out. Okay, it's important to understand the structure and writing of the code. That way you can use it effectively. And we're rehashing the same thing, but I want you to understand. Okay, well, right off the bat, we have a table of contents, and that's what we're looking at here on my online version. Okay, you have your chapters 1 through 9 as we see them here to go along with the introduction and the informative annexes. These informative annexes come in handy as you're doing things in the trade as you move forward. You'll use them. So we have chapters 1 through 9, which are all the major categories. The general categories of wiring and protection, the wiring methods and materials, the equipment for general use, special occupancies, general and special equipment, special conditions, communication systems, and your tables. Okay. We've all kind of seen that. We've all looked at it just a little bit. You have your articles. Okay. So let's go into just a random one. Well, chapter 3 has articles. All of these articles are going to based off being the 300 series, as I call them, because they're all under chapter 3. They go from 300 general requirements for wiring methods and materials all the way through 398, which is open wiring on insulators. Okay. Each one of these guys are broken into parts. Okay. So let's pick up this one. Part 1, general. Okay. Let's go down through here where the second part is. Talks about the general stuff about the article. Where is my part 2? Construction specifications is how things are supposed to be built as a standard. Three, 2, 108. Okay. And then you have your specific sections that are under the parts. And their division is used to further organize the article's subject matter. So it just breaks it down even further. Your tables and figures, okay, they represent the mandatory requirements of a rule. Okay, we see a lot of tables right here. Pull up an example right here of this. This table we use a lot to be able to tell you what part of another table we're going to be using. This one's read by the following: the number of conductors or cables. You determine if I've got more than 2 wires, well, I'm using something like here, and it tells me my available cross-sectional area is 40%. I can't fill it more than 40%. Do remember these notes to the table, okay? They're critical that they have an impact somewhere along the lines of what you're doing, okay? Again, this was the very first table on chapter 9. You pull that up in your book and look at it. Exceptions, okay? Exceptions to the code or to the main code rule. Informative notes, they're explanatory material for specific rule, not a requirement, okay? Annexes, they're additional explanatory information such as tables of references, but not a requirement. And then you got your indexes, okay? And then the following part of that is going to be the changes to the code. That breaks down your code book itself, basically 1 through 12, okay? And I'm not necessarily going to go through every one of these again. You want you to go through and look at it. What I want to talk about is how to locate a specific requirement or a specific code, okay? So what you got, how do you go about finding what you're looking for in the code book? Depends on, and to some degree, your experience with the NEC. Experts typically know the requirements, so they will just go to the correct rule. Very experienced people might only need the table of contents to locate the requirement for what they're looking for. On the other hand, an average user, which is me, should take all the tools at their disposal, including the table of contents, the index, and if you're using the electronic version, which is the cheat because I use it because I teach, is going to be the electronic search. Okay. So we've been using the table of contents right off of the bat. Okay. Let's look at special occupancies. What do we find out about special occupancies? Well, we talk about our class 1, class 2, and class 3 divisions. So depending on what I'm looking for, if I knew it was a special occupancy I'm trying to find a code for, well, I can go right here and it breaks it down and we figure out what we're looking for actually fits. If it's a trailer park, is it an RV, mobile home, are you dealing with the cannabis stuff, wherever it is, carnivals, circuses, and fairs? Yeah, all of those things. Spray applications, coding processes, places tells you that gives you code references to that. So this goes on to say, Article 230 applies to services, and because this article is so large, it's divided up into multiple parts, 8 parts to be exact. Okay, and let's talk about that. Let's Article 230. Talk about services. And back over here, I can see that part 1 is general, part 2 is underground services. Oh, I missed part 3 somewhere. Yep, there's part 3, service entrance conductors, part 4, service entrance. Okay, service entrance equipment, 6, and it just keeps on going on. Part 7, and there's another part here that's going 7 articles. With this knowledge, you can quickly go to the table of contents and see the list of the equipment designated means in part 4. Okay. And yours is going to show this right here. What part of the system you can look on your system and visualize it as a 1-line diagram and figure out which part of your system you're going to have to deal with. And it'll tell you to go through here. Okay. Am I doing the overcurrent protection, the general, the disconnect, the conductors, the underground service conductors, overhead service conductors? It gives me the references. And I go find that. And you'll be able to find that in your book also. Okay. Let's talk about using the index. Okay. If you use the index, which lists the subject in alphabetical order, to look up the term service designate, there'll be no listing. So let's try to find it. Let's go back to the NFPA. Let's see, I have an index in here somewhere. Do I have an index? Mine's probably a digital index. I know that if you go ahead and go to your index in the NEC, because I have my book here next to me also, you'll find the index starting at the back of Annex K. And I don't think I've got it in here. It's not letting me show it. So they've used the index and turned it into digital. And that's what my search function is. But if you go to page 865, you'll actually find your index. Okay. And you'll be able to follow along with this. Look up the term service disconnect. Okay, well, let's flip back. I have tabs in mine where I have tabs actually inside of my index, so I can quickly flip to the S section and save just a couple of seconds. It says look up service disconnect. There's no listing. But how about disconnect means? So let's flip back to D. How about that? Disconnecting means. I found that right at page 876, and it's got a whole bunch of stuff. So you find disconnect means, but what part of disconnect means is that going to apply to? So you have to look down through there, see which one fits. Okay. They go on to say if you try disconnect means and services, you'll find the index rules indicates Rule 230 Part 6. Because the NEC doesn't give a page number in the index, you'll need to use the table of contents to find it. So you're literally flipping from the index to the table of contents to go back and forth to be able to find it unless you have your tabs. Okay, and your tabs will actually tell you if you've got them in the right spot exactly where you can go. I use my tabs on the side of my book all the time. These guys, I don't know if you can see them very well. I suggest that you put your tabs in your book if you don't have them already. So that's a kind of a rough idea to go through there. You can go through more and look, But as we go through the next week, this will be the only video I'll be posting this week. I believe I want everybody to watch this. Okay. This will help you. Now, I want you to want to think you can customize your book, put your tabs in it, use a highlighter, or use a pink or something that actually you can see the lettering through once you've highlighted it. But as you go through and you see things that you use all the time, or you go back and reference them, whether it be a residential or commercial, highlight it in your book. Okay, highlight it. It's what you want to customize your book. Um, so we can actually get involved in the NEC process as electricians. Okay, uh, so they change it every 2 years. There's hundreds of people involved in it. If you ever decided to do that, in the very back of the book, it actually tells you about the process, if I'm not mistaken, on how to do that. Okay. Very back page talks about the updated standards, the interpretations, gives you some references that way. Very front of the book, does it give us that also? Very first page talks about the history and the development of the National Electrical Code. And if I'm not mistaken, just right there in the front, we start seeing all of the committees. Okay. And if you decided that you wanted to be a part of some of this, all you'd have to do is just apply for it. Most of these things are big time engineers and whatnot. I'd like to see real electricians on these, and sometimes there are. In the end, don't let this book scare you. Okay, this is a book that's been good to me. Okay, there will be some questions posted later in the week. We're going to be going through further into the first parts of the NFP 70 2023. Again, this is your Hillbilly Professor Scott Sexton saying thank you very much for your time, and looking forward to seeing you later in the course.